that vehicle. Same thing here, absolutely the same thing. So the data retrieval process is for all utilities, for both stationary and mobile sources. And of course, these are the traditional. Yes, sir.
Go back a minute to that previous slide. When you Pareto the users, obviously you have different size buildings. You reduce it down to energy used per square foot.
You can normalize. Yeah, I actually like normalized data. Some people don't, and I prefer it because I want to see that usage pattern. I want to see the how hard is this building or vehicle or whatever is being used. So I'm looking at it from a variety of different perspectives, but I like normalized data for that reason. So even if you normalize, you're going to see different energy patterns. You're going to see it season to season. You're going to see it year to year. And the shape of your curve is going to be important, whether you're summer peaking or winter peaking, and how you go after solving some of your, say, approaching some of your energy conservation projects. I've done energy conservation projects all over the map, and for peak shaving, for carbon footprints.
Gave me a big handle on it.
Oh, big time, yeah.
Because before that, I noticed the first water bill spike. And I'm trying to figure out why. And then I found out the meter that they were reading served my building, also served the school of business and human resources and physical plant. So if you have a situation where even our sub-metering system is not on every building, so how are you going to do an assessment? And a foundation for that is that the historical data I had people manually reading the meter and writing down what it was.
Right.
But it got to me with the same meter to get, because one guy would see it as a 9 and another guy would see it as a 7. So how do you do that when you don't have single meters for either gas or water or electricity? How do you make that assessment?
Well, generally, most facilities I've dealt with have had individual meter bases for electricity and individual metering for all utilities at that particular facility. I've yet to see the facility that has an aggregated meter, one great big meter someplace. Okay.
Duke Power supplies us with the substation. Okay? That substation supplies the campus. And then some.
Right, I understand what you're saying. I've hung.
Gives me an electric bill.
I've hung CTs, current transformers, current transducers on each leg coming into a building or a process, and I've split them out that way. Now, yeah, you're going to have to add some cost to this. The sub-meter data is extremely important because that's ultimately what you want to get to. If you're not sub-metering on a meter base on each building or each location, then you have no choice to do that.
I just went to that. To summarize the historical data, it just came online at the end of last month. But I tried to establish a baseline by using the data they were giving me before, and it was so erratic and so off the chart. My 2008, I spent $286,000 on electricity alone. 2009, by June, they had the bill for $543,000.
Wow.
That's what I was using for that. Because obviously the data was not right. But I'd like to have some means of going back and establishing some kind of baseline. It doesn't have to be entirely accurate. But would you use square footage?
I prefer square footage for buildings. Okay, I like to normalize on a per square foot basis. Now, you've got to be careful with that because you don't want to compare that with somebody else's normalized data who may be in North Dakota because they have different seasonal effects.
Well, I have a problem with square footage when it comes to, I'd like to use the analogy of the old lady in the liquor house. Right? They both live in the same size house, but she gets up at 9 and goes to bed at 7:30.
Right.
Whereas the liquor house starts at 9 and don't go to bed until 8 o'clock
You're right.
in the morning.
You're right.
But they're both the same square footage. So is that a valid way to do it?
I think it is. I think when you sub-meter, you're going to see your use pattern in total. Okay, now, again, the actual measurement, we're going to get into this in just a minute, the actual measurement is only as good as whatever setting you have. And if that setting is an operational setting based on a clock, that's a different measurement than what you would have somebody who doesn't use the same clock time. So, I mean, yeah, I mean, you can do it on time, you can do it on square footage, but the sub-metering data is absolutely critical. But operation is driving your use as well. Now, the best thing you can do in this particular case is try to pick out two similar buildings with similar attributes. That's why this comparison with LEED and some of these things is a dangerous game, to exactly the point you raise, because there's too many variables that cause energy use, whether it's operation or occupancy or climactic conditions. I mean, just the swinging climactic conditions drives the crap out of what goes on in building use. Yes, sir.
Yeah, getting to the climatic conditions, how would you, and this is getting another step lower, I think, in normalizing your data to 3 cooling days and 3 heating days? How do you factor that in?
What I'm saying is the conversation we're having is how do you compare your data with somebody else? I want you to be the best you can be. Okay, and that's why these baselines are so important. I've been very, very frustrated trying to make that comparison in the past to exactly these points, because somebody doesn't drive the car the same way. You give somebody a Honda Accord, you give two different people the same Honda Accord, and they're going to come away with 2 different gas mileages. And the same thing happens with the operation of a building. Basically, you drive your building. It just doesn't leave its foundation. Okay, and the same thing happens, whether it's occupancy, whether it's, whatever it is. Ultimately, buildings use energy for the same reason why manufacturing facilities use energy, our bodies use energy. It is how much mass goes through that building on a daily basis. Mass drives energy use. You write any energy equation, it's always a function of mass. So when you have more people coming through for a longer period of time, by definition, you've got to cool and heat those people. Now, I've had circumstance, I made a kind of a glib reference in the last one about, I had a situation one time, particularly in manufacturing. People think that the energy use in manufacturing is to make a particular product. It's not. It's to keep people warm in that manufacturing facility. Okay, that's where all the energy goes. That's where all the water goes. In fact, you bring up an interesting, funny point. I knew what my process chemistry was, so I knew how much water was going into the process, yet I was tenfold bigger in the total metered amount of water going into this process simply because people were flushing the toilets. God, I had 1,000 people running through this plant. Yeah, it never really dawned on me that the data would show up that strangely, but it did. Your sub-metering is what you have to do to split out your facilities. If you don't have a central big meter, again, if you have that, you're way ahead of the game because you're metering on a large meter account. You're not taking meter-based fees against every last one of your facilities. You're as conserved in a total holistic approach on that campus from an electrical perspective on being able to gain cost away from your utility supplier. But for people here who aren't aggregated, if you do not have aggregated meters, Monday morning when you get back to campus, I'd have a real sit-down, come to Jesus meeting about meter aggregation. And you can do this electronically now. You don't have to do this with substations. You don't have to hang one great big meter on a meter base and run your conductors out to the various buildings. At least, if nothing else, you get rid of your individual base fees. But you also are able to use large meter fees and ratchets as opposed to small meter fees and ratchets that you have on small users. Now, taking this the next step, once you've done your sub-metering and you've looked at this, okay, then how do you conserve these buildings? How do you conserve facilities? I have done everything from individual conservation to within a campus to going beyond campus or going beyond my site. Let me give you an example. I conserved a process years ago, and when you watch your conservations, whether you normalize data or not, and you can normalize for, again, I prefer normalization on square footage. That's